Okay, so moving on from integers, strings, doubles, floats, and booleans, we're now going to look at a whole new type of variable, and that is the array. So imagine you're making a Twitter clone and you want a way of displaying people's tweets. You need to store that tweet content somewhere, and what you don't want to do is to have to create a new variable for every tweet that's created. Otherwise you'd have tons of different variables with all sorts of different variable names. That would be a nightmare to keep track of. So that is where you would use an array. So we'll create one like this. We use the square brackets near the enter key on your keyboard, and then we're going to have several different values in our array. So we might have ages of people in our family, for example. So 35, 36, 5, and 2. So separated by commas, and this array then takes those 4 values and they're all stored within the array. So the obvious question, what if we wanted to get at one of those particular values? Well, all we do, so say we want to print one of those values to the console, we use square brackets again, and then we refer to the location of the item within the array. And there we go. So we've got the number 5 printed there, which is perhaps not what you were expecting. You might have thought that the second item in this array would be 36. But actually, array counting starts at 0. So if you wanted to get that 35 out of this array, you would print array 0 rather than array 1. So now we can create arrays and we can get values from them. We can also work out how many items there are in an array. So if we wanted to add an item on the end, we would use array.append and then just add on the new element. So that might be a 1, for example. And then the array would have a new element on the end. And there it is. Similarly, we can remove elements from the array. So we can remove all, remove last, remove first, or we could remove a particular item. So if we remove at 1, for example, which item would that remove? It would remove the 36. We can also sort an array very easily, just using array sort, and that will then sort all the items in the array in numerical and alphabetical order. There we go. And finally, if you want to view the contents of an array in the console, you can just print it, and that will show you the array and all the elements in it. Okay, there's lots more that we can do with arrays, but I'm going to leave it at that for now and just give you a quick challenge. So I'd like you to create an array with the numbers 3.87, 7.1, and 8.9 in it, and then remove 7.1 and append to the end of the array the product of the 2 remaining elements, i.e. 3.07 multiplied by 8.9. That's it. So do it looking at these or not as you need to, but best of luck. Go for it. All right, should have been fairly straightforward. I'm going to create an array called my array. I'm using var this time because I'm going to need to remove an item in the array. And let's add in these numbers. So 3.87, 7.1, and 8.9. Next, we need to remove the middle one. So we do that using my array dot remove at, and we want to remove the one with number 1 because remember it goes 0, 1, 2, and that's removed the 7.1 for us. And then finally, let's append that last value. So my array dot append, and we want to multiply the 2 remaining values together. So we're going to take my array 0 multiplied by my array 1. There we go. So now we should have the two original values, so 3.87 and 8.9, and then the multiple of those two contained in the third element in the array. Okay, worth saying briefly that arrays don't have to contain numbers. They can contain strings or any object you like, and they can even contain a mixture of those. So we could, for example, contain a string, a number, and a boolean, all in a single array. Quite often though, you want to specify the particular type when you create the array, because it's not usually a great idea to have different types in a single array. And you can do that by, let's say we want to have an array of strings. We could create that by just putting the variable type inside the square brackets and then having a pair of parentheses at the end. And this essentially means create an array which will contain some strings. But at the moment, as we can see here, it's an empty array. So we'd have to use append or one of the other methods to add a value to it. Okay, that's more or less all you need to know about arrays right now. So let's move on to a slightly different type of variable, and that is the dictionary. And a number of other programming languages don't have dictionaries. So even if you've programmed before, you might not have come across the dictionary. So let's see what they are. If we create our dictionary, and what we do is we create it in much the same way as we did our array with our square brackets, but each item in the dictionary now has a key. So for example, we might define a computer for some of us as something to play Call of Duty on. And now we've defined the computer field within the dictionary array to have the value something to play Call of Duty on. Similarly, we might define coffee as the best drink ever. So this is something of a literal dictionary where we have a particular word and then we have the definition of that word. Of course, that doesn't have to be what we use dictionaries for, but if we did set it up that way, we could then get one of those values by using dictionary and then the key or the name that represents that. So dictionary computer would then be something to play Call of Duty on. And now here you can see we've got this word optional, which came up in the previous section. And here we're going to look at it in a little bit more detail. And then later on in this section, we'll really dive into what these optionals are. But right now, if I use dictionary and then the key computer, I know that it has a value because I defined that. But if I try and use dictionary house, for example, to try and get the value for the house field inside this dictionary, you can see I get the result nil. Now, if I try and set that equal to the text of a label, for example, or if I try and display that word on the screen, that's going to give me an error. We need to be very careful about using things like this unless we're absolutely sure that this has a value. So dictionary computer, I know for sure that it has a value because I just defined it up there. So if I know absolutely for certain that it has a value, I can use the exclamation mark to what's known as unwrap it. And this is basically a way of telling Xcode that, don't worry, I know absolutely for sure that dictionary computer has a value because I've defined it up here. If you turn out to be wrong, Xcode will punish you with a complete app crash So you do need to use these very sparingly and very carefully, only when you're absolutely certain that this has a value. We'll see some better ways of dealing with optionals which let you test whether or not it has a value before using it later on in this section. So for now, we'll leave it as an optional. We can use dictionary.count just as we did with array.count. So dictionary.count would be 2 is the answer, because there are 2 items in this dictionary. We can add extra values. We don't append them like we did with dictionaries. We just set them in the way that you might expect. So we set dictionary.pen, for example, equal to old-fashioned writing implement. And that will then add it directly into the dictionary with the key pen. Aha, can you see why I've got an error there? It's because I define dictionary with a let, which means it's immutable or can't change. So I need to update that to a var, which will allow me to add items in there. I can also remove items from a dictionary using dictionary.remove value for key. And so if I want to remove the computer value, then I just do it like that. And similarly, like an array, I can print a dictionary and see the values in the console. There we go. So what we've got left is pen and coffee. And also, just like we could define empty arrays like this, we can define empty dictionaries. So if, for example, I had a dictionary of game characters, which was going to store the strength of each type of character, I might use a string to represent the name of the character, and then a double to represent the score. And then I could create my dictionary just like I did with my string array down there. Then if I wanted to add, for example, a ghost, which has a strength of, 8.7, then I would just do it like that. But of course, I would have to create my game characters dictionary with a var to allow me to add a value to it. Okay. And notice there as well, as I mentioned briefly in the previous section, doubles and floats are not absolutely precise. So this is pretty darn precise. And if you actually try and use it anywhere in your program, it will be precise enough. You won't get that rounding error here. But often when you actually print doubles, you'll see they're not exactly what they're supposed to be. If you want a value which is exactly correct, you can use the decimal type, and then you'll see that this value updates to precisely 8.7. There we go. But floats and doubles are much more widely used, mostly because they're a lot faster and a lot more efficient. Okay, so that's pretty much all you need to know about dictionaries for now. Let's set you a challenge to give you a quick bit of practice with dictionaries. I'd like you to set up a menu dictionary, which has 3 items on it. Pizza, which will cost $10.99. Ice cream, which will cost $4.99. And salad, which will cost $7.99. Then I'd like you to take 2 of those items, whichever they are, and print the total cost of my meal is, and then work out what that is using the elements in the dictionary. Okay, pretty simple. Best of luck. Go for it. Okay, let's give it a go then. So I'm going to use let because we're not going to be editing this dictionary after we've created it. So we're going to have pizza, which is a string. So I've put it in double quotes there. And that's going to have a value of 10.99, which is a float or a double, in fact. So I'm not going to put it in quotes. Oops, and actually I forgot the variable name. So menu is equal to pizza, which is 10.99, ice cream, which is 4.99, and salad, which is 7.99. So now we've created our menu, and then let's attempt our print statement. So the total cost of my meal is, and I'm going to choose pizza and ice cream. So to get the cost of a pizza, I need to use menu and then pizza. And I need to force unwrap that to show that I'm sure that this has a value. And then I'm going to add to that menu ice cream. And I need to force unwrap that as well, which I'm happy to do because I defined it up here so I know it has a value. And there we go. You can see the total cost of my meal is $15.98. Excellent. So now that's all we need for dictionaries and also arrays. And those are all the fundamental data types that we'll be using in our iOS development and in this course in general. Next then, we're going to look at our first basic Swift programming construct, which is the if statement. So we'll see how they work and how we can use them to add more power to our code. And then we'll be putting everything that we've learned together to create a simple game, How Many Fingers?